Hello, adventurer. It's good to see you. You have made it to the morning grind.
Welcome, welcome.
It's the live stream at the beginning of the Geekverse, where we talk about all types of topics in geekdom, gaming, and fantasy, with an emphasis on being constructive and creating the things that we want to exist in the world.
It's all on the grind, Sizemore. Can't be too fine, can't be too coarse.
That's exactly right. There are a lot of adventures to be had today. Dungeons to explore and monsters to slay, and who knows what a random encounter might send our way. That's why we have to prepare, so settle in now for the morning grind with your favorite beverage in hand.
Tea? Or maybe something a little stronger. I've got a few bottles of the old Wynyard left.
Whatever you want. Pull up a chair. If you're feeling fancy, how about a cappuccino? Or a frappuccino? Or how about an espresso?
Just tea, thank you.
Sounds good to me, Gandalf. Whatever you want. I'm just glad you're here.
Everyone is welcome. You can just watch if you want. You don't have to worship anything you don't want to worship.
Thank you, Mike. But be forewarned.
Sometimes we get really strange characters around here.
Wait, what's that you say? Why can't you come and be a part of the stream?
My wife would disown me.
Oh no, I bet she'll be fine with it. Come on in.
Am I scared for my safety? No.
What are we supposed to do?
Everybody do the secret handshake.
Secret cultist handshake.
Oh, now do wizards who love each other.
This, my friend, is a science.
I still don't have gifts, but it's fine.
It's all on the grind, son. Can't be too fine, can't be too coarse.
Dude, this would be a sick place to bring the band.
Indeed it would be, Dave. It really would. I'm seeing more people coming in. Welcome. Glad to have you here. Oh, look, here's someone new.
Is this the cultist meetup?
Yes it is.
Come to hang out? Please accept me. I have nothing else.
Okay, we accept you. Everyone's welcome here.
Brought some snacks.
Well, that makes things even better.
You want some coffee? I don't drink coffee. You sure?
It's cultist coffee.
What makes it cultist coffee?
I'm a cultist and I'm drinking it.
Oh. Then I'll have some.
What exactly is going on here?
I'm seeing more people coming in. Welcome. It's so great to have you. Oh, and look, here comes another stranger.
Can we help you?
Yes, fellow cultists. I could really use some food.
Oh yeah? Welcome. We have donuts.
Oh, it's me. I'm glad I'm here. I'm sure you have a few questions for me, though.
What's your name? Who do you work for? What god do you worship?
Great questions, Rob.
I'm Steve King, and I worship Nyarlathotep.
No, not really. I'm just Heath, and I won't be worshiping anything this morning. But I will be your host. Welcome to the office. We're going to have a great time. I've got my coffee ready, because now it's time for the morning grind.
If you could become a fish, that would be amazing. Then I could command you with my mental fish powers.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the morning grind. Welcome to the office. I am Heath. It is great to have you this morning. I hope that your Monday is starting out well. I had a pretty chill weekend, but pretty creative. I was trying to force myself to get back to work writing on stuff. And so I was working on scripts, and I did make some progress there. So I've been trying to do that. Man, I still have to catch up on a whole bunch of other things, though. Though yesterday, I did also return to writing on the Tales of Rabovania RPG. Actually, I figure out what to do with that in a larger scope, but I was trying to get the 5e rules finished up, and I think I basically did that. I'm about to start going through section by section and going ahead and going to layout. So I'm kind of going to try to lay it out as I proof for another time all the different sections. So I was trying to download the right templates so I would have the right templates to lay out, because I want to be able to make sure I only do this once this time, unlike with Goodnight Sword, which I had to do a couple of times. So let's see who's all here. James is here. PH is here. Welcome. Let's see. Draco is here. Sable Phoenix, Mental Fish reporting in. Zero the Blade. Welcome. Hey, Tomocrat. Wonderful. So glad to see everybody. Oh, Zero Theory is here as well. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. So good to see you. So I might end up just having the fifth edition rules, or go ahead and put the fifth edition rules in. But man, I was also thinking with other projects. What I was originally trying to do was going ahead and getting out and or trying to put together the Fated Edge system that I was working on. And I was thinking, well, I need to go ahead and do these fifth edition rules since they're sitting right here. But it's probably time to return to that again, because I really do need some rules that are my go-to rules. So might be time to return to Fated Edge, the development of that after I finish the 5e Tales of Rabavania rules. So we will see. So speaking of Tales of Rabavania, let's see. Let's go over here. First of all, if you are new here, I'll put the Ravenkeep Discord link. I ask a very important question in the Discord link, which we're going to be addressing today. But my brother asked me, which is the motivation for today's episode. My brother asked me last night. He said this. He says, if you were going to get involved in some regular play of a skirmish game, do you know which you would play? Or Warhammer Army type game, I suppose. So that was what he posed to me actually it was yesterday afternoon. If you were going to get involved in some regular play of a skirmish game, do you know which one you would play? Or a Warhammer Army type game, I suppose. What do people think about that? I put that question out when I got it yesterday under the board games. I didn't have exactly a good place to put that, but I just put it under the general board games. Which would you play? So I put that out under Discord, and then we had some discussion. And so, well, see, the out of print stuff is is an issue. Currently, it would be Frosthaven. The benefit of that is the rules won't change on you, and the figures are fairly inexpensive. Oh, with that, I would like Axis and Allies. Well, Axis and Allies, that seems like a different style kind of game. I don't think that's the same kind of thing. But I've got Axis and Allies over here. Now, speaking of out of print things, I was like, well, gee, if it really had to be a skirmish game, and specifically if it were going to be a warband style game, I would go and find the original Mordheim. I had a lot of fun with that. I haven't seen a skirmish or a warband game done as well as Mordheim since. But I did bring up the fact that, well, now actually come to think of it, I do have this that I've never really gotten into. War of Kings, Kings of War Vanguard right here. And then also I've got this to look at as well. Oathmarked Battles in the Lost Age, and I just haven't. Now, this is made by the same guy that's Frosthaven. Zero Theory says currently it would be Frosthaven. But Seth and I tried to play Frosthaven, and we didn't like it. I don't think its combat system works. I've got Frosthaven sitting over here. We could look at it sometime as well, because it seems like a lot of people who had been playing Mordheim or would be playing Mordheim had come over here and gone to Frosthaven. But I'm not sure that Frosthaven really works. I played it. I tried looking at it with another friend of mine as well, and we were all rather disappointed with the way that. Excuse me, Frosthaven. Yes. So yes, excuse me. You would play Frosthaven. Well, he's already playing Frosthaven. I mean, that's also a different kind of style game. If you're talking about, I wouldn't have come up with. Excuse me. Yes. I had Frostgrave on the mind because I was over here I had Frostgrave sitting right here. I know that a lot of people are playing for a skirmish style game, Frostgrave. Frostgrave I didn't like. So we can take a look at that and analyze why, because I forget exactly, but its combat system I didn't think worked. Now Frosthaven, the second edition, or not second edition, but the sequel to Gloomhaven, I wouldn't have considered that a game in this style. I mean, he's already playing that. He and his wife play Frosthaven at night. And I might do some Frosthaven or Gloomhaven. I haven't been all the way through Gloomhaven. Might do that one night. Hey, Spud. But yeah, so Frostgrave is not one that I think is going to work. And Frosthaven is one that is like a different style game. Aren't the Haven games legacy games? Like, aren't there spoilers and whatnot? Yes, there are. Well, but anyway, so we were talking about back and forth, and he was like, "Wouldn't you just play? What about just playing Warhammer?" And I was like, "Well, there's no Warhammer right now." So he brought up Kings of War, and I was like, "Well, I've never looked at Kings of War." See, I'm worried about Oathmark because I realized it says on the back that it's created by the same guy who created Frostgrave, and after we didn't really enjoy Frostgrave, I was like, oh, because I really love some of the Oathmark miniatures. In fact, I love a lot of the Oathmark miniatures, actually. So I was like, oh, this looks really cool. But I'm going to have to study Oathmark to find out if it is actually a reasonable game. But maybe, I haven't seen people talk about this. Is anybody using this as a Mordheim alternative? I kind of got this for this purpose, but I never really got into it beyond getting it. So it's another thing to possibly look at here on the Morning Grind one day. So Vanguard might be the current like Mordheim style game that's really good. I don't know. It looks like it's well produced, the book and such. So I don't know. But he said, "Hey, let's take a look at Kings of War." He said Kings of War has free rules, so that looks like mostly like a Warhammer battle game, the Warhammer Fantasy Battle. So Kings of War does seem to be like, okay, well, if you're not going to have Warhammer Fantasy Battles anymore, where does everybody go who liked Warhammer Fantasy Battles? It seems like Kings of War. So Kings of War was free, and so he said, let's at least take a look at it. So I said, okay, that sounds like something I should do on the Morning Grind. So I asked him if he was trying to get his sons involved, because they're the right age to be involved. And he said, but as I've said before here on the Morning Grind, I have trouble. I've tried getting my nephews into different kinds of games like that, but they haven't stuck. Maybe they were arguably a little bit too young, but I got him Star Wars Legion. I would try to get him involved in the Game of Thrones game. I was getting involved in that kind of heavy when it just came out. Now they're all the miniatures are sitting over there in a box. I still love some of those miniatures, but I don't know. I hadn't really stuck. And he said that, well, he says that he bets that it would stick, or if it was going to work, then he and I would have to play. So if he and I were playing each other, the boys would want to play. So I said, well, that's interesting. So, all right, well, I'll check this out. So Kings of War then. Let's see what it's about. Because I think it's supposed to be basically, if you played Warhammer Fantasy Battles, then come over here and play Kings of War. My main tabletop board game now that Mage Knight is dead is Battletech. Battletech, I've got one of the Battletech boxes over here. Before we jump in, though, so that's the conversation that I had with my brother by text yesterday that kind of inspired today's Morning Grind. Let's go over here and check out for one moment before we get started with that, the Goodnight Sword Kickstarter. I just put the link over here. I noticed that just before I came on, we picked up another backer. So now we have 40 backers for Goodnight Sword. And that is a medieval fantasy bedtime story that I wrote and is illustrated by Adam Botsford. He did a fantastic job illustrating this. And of course, that is my takeoff on Goodnight Moon in the Tales of Rabavania, which I was writing in yesterday. So this is the first book out that's in that subject, obviously for the youngest audience, in a world of gallantry, chivalry, and rabbits based on the classic story Goodnight Moon. So if you know someone who might be interested in, if you have young children, or if you know someone who has young children, and you would like for them to be interested in medieval storytelling and fantasy, please check out Goodnight Sword. Goodnight Sword, there's also an animated audiobook. So if you want to listen to the whole thing, you can listen to the whole thing right there, which also means you could have somebody listening to it tonight as a bedtime story. You could actually put the animated audiobook of Goodnight Sword up, but then here on the Kickstarter page, we've got the digital edition, and we also have the physical hardback books. So if you'd rather have a hardback book for bedtime stories, I know I would. This is where we're doing the hardback book. So if you would like a hardback book, especially, please come by on the Kickstarter. The proof is already approved. We're going to get them printed up as soon as the Kickstarter is over, for anybody who would like to have one. And thank you to everybody who is a part of this, part of the Morning Grind, whether you're watching live or on replay, who has already come over and been a part of this. Have I tried Drowned Earth? I have not. I don't know anything about that one. James says, Battletech is awesome. I'm currently into the skirmish rules, Alpha Strike Force. I may have moved. I've had to move things. I've still got to get even more cleaned up around here, but I've had to move some things to an auxiliary shelf in the bedroom. Battletech may have gone in there, so I forget exactly what Battletech box I've got, but I've got one of the Battletech boxes. Yeah, I don't see it in here. It must have been moved to the auxiliary shelf. All right, let me get everything ready here for some Kings of War. So Kings of War. I downloaded this free from the Mantic site. So here it is. And this is a much better... My thumbnail for today sucked, but that's the way the image was on the book, the book was on their website. But this has a much better cover than what's on the image of today's thumbnail. So this is Kings of War. So my brother looked at it very briefly, and he said that he liked its simplicity. Let's all right, so Kings of War, here we are. Tomocrat says, "Are you looking for combat or diplomat combat?" Yeah, we need something. We need something that we played Warhammer Fantasy Battles. James says, "If you like Warhammer but don't want an incalculable financial albatross." Yeah, that's an issue too. I said that, hey, let's not do that. There's got to be some game rules out there that we can use other miniatures for that are not just outrageously expensive. I mean, Games Workshop, of course, we've talked about how people are saying that Games Workshop is going to bring back Warhammer Fantasy Battles, but it's going to be outrageously expensive. I mean, I want to look at it because I played tons of Warhammer Fantasy Battles with my brother as a kid. Maybe Warcry 2, but I haven't played it. I don't know any of those. Kill Team and Underworld, maybe Warcry 2, but I haven't played it. And I don't have a 3D printer yet. A friend of mine 3D prints all the time. But I said if I were really to get into it, I told my brother, I was like, well, if we really wanted to do it, and we found some rules that we really liked, coming up with a base size, like a size for the bases, and then getting a 3D printer and printing up the miniatures would be a way to go. Oh, I did notice that my the Army Painter speed paints, the metallic speed paints, finally shipped. I got a notification of that. So Army Painter speed paints have shipped. Of course, painting things up is still a big deal. And I've got two armies in the workshop that are still on their sprues. One undead army, and the other one a northern style Game of Thrones looking army, human army from Fireforge Games. Looking for a reason to get out. So I was like, well, gee, I said I would probably do an undead army first if I were playing with my nephews. Played a game called Tesla versus Edison. It was a race to build the U.S. power grid. Interesting game. I have not heard of that one either. So let's see if Kings of War is any good. I say War of Kings, but War of Kings is my game. Kings of War is their game. So this is done. This is done by Mantic. So I mean, you can immediately tell from the style, this is supposed to be a Warhammer kind of style game. And hobby game, painting, all of that. These rules contain all the information you need to get started with your very first game. You will need a few more things, however. First and foremost, you'll need an opponent, someone to face on the battlefield and enjoy the game with. Each of you will need an army of your own to play. You can get started quickly by picking up the Mantic Army or Mega Army each, picking up a Mantic Army or Mega Army each, or build your forces with units according to your own preference. You could also split the contents of the Shadows of the North starter box between you and use them to begin your own armies. Which is also how Warhammer did it, right? 6-sided dice, just like Warhammer, in 2 colors. Oh, this says in 2 colors. About 15 of each color is enough. These are for rolling in the game and are also useful for showing how much damage a unit takes over time by placing the damage behind the unit. You'll also need a ruler or tape measure that uses inches. 6x4 gaming area. In these rules, whenever we refer to dice or dice, we mean a normal six-sided die, which we call a D6. Sometimes we also use the term like D3, which is the number of D6 divided by 2, rounded down D2. D6 divided by 3. D6 plus 1 means rolling a D6 and adding 1 to the result, or 2D6, which means rolling 2 dice and adding them together. Sometimes one or more modifiers will apply to a roll. If a modifier applies, add or subtract it from each of the die score as appropriate to find the results. For example, if a die roll has a modifier of -1, you would subtract 1 from the score rolled. Thus, if 5 was rolled in the die, it would become a 4. Makes sense. Very easy. When you are allowed to re-roll, simply pick up the number of dice you're allowed to re-roll and roll them again. A second result stands even if it's worse than the first. So that's important. Re-roll, second result stands. Regardless of the number of special rules that apply to a particular circumstance, you can never re-roll a re-roll. The second result always stands. Also pretty classic. So here, I mean, that looks like what could be a game of Warhammer. Nice icy battlefield. In Kings of War, all units are made up of one or more models. The number of models that make up a unit is specified in each unit's stats, explained on page 8, and will normally correspond to the number of models that you get in boxes supplied by Mantic. These models may be attached to bases and formed up into units as described below. Each unit belongs to one of the following types: infantry and heavy infantry. Infantry usually comes in 4 sizes. Troops consisting of 10 models, arranged 5 models wide and in 2 ranks. Regiments consisting of 20 models, arranged 5 models wide and 4 ranks. Hordes consisting of 40 models, arranged 10 models wide and in 4 ranks, and legions consisting of 60 models, arranged 10 models wide and in 6 ranks. Okay, interesting that they're giving you number of models and ranks. That's not for you to decide. Although, you know, like over there with the Game of Thrones game, they actually come in movement trays, which I like having movement trays. And so all of the different units were the same number of ranks, like ranks wide and ranks deep. So I know Sable Phoenix didn't know Kings of War. But is anybody else? Is anyone playing this that's here? Is anyone playing Kings of War? Do you recommend it? Or have you played it? Cavalry comes in 3 sizes. So, I mean, this could also be used in a Mighty Empires game, right? I still think that War Master, I was looking at War Master again yesterday. I downloaded it after this conversation. The fan brew rules, which are like the revision of the rules. We should look at that sometime. I still kind of think that War Master seems right to play games of the battles of Mighty Empires with. But this could work too. This is what it's designed for. Is this at 10 millimeter scale? Seems perfect for it if we're going to be commanding legions with 60 models. No. Not that, well, you could probably scale it to whatever you wanted to. But no, this is like, I mean, look at these models. These are your classic Warhammer. Of course, the Warhammer models get larger as they went, but like 32 millimeter. I mean, these are the kinds of models that people play their Dungeons and Dragons games with. So when you're talking about 60 models, you're talking about 60 Dungeons and Dragons size miniatures. Love War. We'll have to take a look at War Master sometime on here. I'll put that now we're sliding into war games and stuff. There's still lots of RPGs to look at that are on my list over here. Oh, no. Oh, it says right here. So each infantry model has a 20 millimeter square base. Each heavy infantry model has a 25 millimeter square base. So there we go. So there's your base size, 20 millimeter for heavy infantry. Interesting that they have different sizes for heavy and standard infantry. Heavy infantry is 25 millimeter base. Cavalry comes in 3 sizes. Troops consisting of 5 models arranged in a single rank. Regiments consisting of 10 models arranged 5 models wide in 2 ranks. Hordes consisting of 20 models arranged 10 models wide and in 2 ranks. Each cavalry model has a 25 by 50 millimeter rectangular base. Although if you're printing your own miniatures, yeah, I might be tempted to half this. I've seen people on YouTube do like Warhammer at half scale. If you were printing it, then you could. And get more units on your tabletop. A chariot unit comes in 4 sizes. Troops consisting of 2 models arranged in a single rank. Regiments consisting of 3 models arranged in a single rank. Hordes consisting of 4 models in a single rank. Legions of 6 models arranged 3 models wide and in 2 ranks. Each chariot model is 50 by 100 millimeter rectangular base. Large infantry, monstrous infantry, swarms, and large cavalry. Large infantry, monstrous infantry, large cavalry, and swarms come in 3 sizes. Regiments consisting of 3 models arranged in a single rank. Hordes, 6 models, 3 ranks wide and 3 models wide in 2 ranks. Legions consisting of 12 models arranged 6 models wide in 2 ranks. Each large infantry and swarm have a 40 millimeter square base. Note that swarms of human-sized models must have at least 3 models per model base, while a swarm of smaller creatures like orklings should aim for 5 or more models per base. Each large cavalry and monstrous infantry has a 50 millimeter square base. War engine is a unit consisting of a single machine, like a catapult or bolt thrower. It must have a number of it may also have a number of crew models, but these are purely decorative and should be arranged around the machine in a suitably entertaining fashion. Since the crew is merely decorative, they are ignored for all in-game purposes such as checking ranges, movement, etc. Each war engine model has a 50 millimeter square base. Hey, Kyron. Welcome. Well, glad to have you here now. Kyron says, ugh, I wish I could watch your streams more often. They just conflict with life. I'll catch it later, though. Well, they're always available for replay, but I'm glad you stopped by. Good to see you. I understand life conflicting. So a monster. A monster is a unit consisting of a single model, a large and powerful mythic beast or magical construct. Models normally have 50 millimeter square bases. Some monsters may be labeled monster, CHT, in which case they have a 50 by 100 millimeter chariot base. Oh, so monster chariot. Other rare exceptions may be noted in the unit's profile. Oh, so there are more units. Titans. A Titan is a unit consisting of a single model, a being of both gargantuan size and strength. A Titan model has a 75 millimeter square base. And then a hero. So we do have certain heroes here. And that was a problem I always had with Warhammer. Or especially, well, often had in Warhammer while I was playing it, but especially in retrospect. I just hate the hero models being so effective. It makes sense in the sense that Warhammer and these, they aren't battles. If you're looking at one model per person, we're not talking about battles between hundreds and hundreds of guys. We're talking about a far smaller number of guys. So a hero could be much more effective, but still, I like having regiments of troops. I like ranks of troops. That's why I'd be tempted to half the size if I were printing. That probably won't happen because I think that my brother actually already has a lot of Kings of War miniatures at that size. So, but a hero is a unit consisting of a single model. So we'll have to see how influential heroes are in this game. A hero is a unit consisting of a single model. It can be an officer, a sorcerer, or even a mighty lord of its race. Heroes can vary in size between different races and can ride many different types of mount or even monstrous war beasts. So heroes always have a tag and bracket specifying what type of unit they belong to. This helps from determining their height and other special rules that are relevant to that type. So a hero could be hero infantry or hero heavy infantry, a hero cavalry, hero monster, etc. Sometimes heroes have options that allow them to choose different mounts. If a mount is chosen, the hero's unit type will of course change to that of the relevant mount as specified in the hero's entry. Heroes fit in the relevant base of their type unless specified otherwise. For instance, a hero infantry will be on a 20 millimeter square base, a hero cavalry on a 25 by 50 millimeter base, etc. You may need wider or deeper bases for exceptionally wide heroes, monsters, titans, or war instances. In rare cases, use the smallest base you can fit your model on. Friendly and enemy units. Heroic scale is sometimes awesome, sometimes annoying. Hey, Vision. Yeah, and there's if you're considering this like a heroic scale board game, but also just heroic scale monsters or heroic scale miniatures, and because that also means different things to different manufacturers. So unit footprints and movement, trays, and multi-bases. If a unit consists of a large number of models, it's far more convenient when moving it around to place it on a movement tray. That way you effectively have a single object to move on the battlefield rather than a large number of, say, 20 elf infantry models. This speeds up gameplay immensely. The ideal movement tray is a piece of plastic, thick cardboard, or plasticard that's cut to the exact space occupied by the bases of the model forming the unit and painted to color of the bases. For instance, a regiment of 20 elf infantry models occupies a rectangular tray 20 millimeters wide and 80 millimeters deep. If the tray has a little lip around the unit, normally up to a couple of millimeters wide, this does not matter and players should ignore the lip when measuring distances. It is even faster, not to mention more practical, to actually glue models' bases directly onto the tray. Oh, that way you have an army that effectively consists of a very small number of individual elements, very compact and easy to store and transport. Now in Warhammer, you had to actually remove individual models, right? So you couldn't, some of them were, I noticed in like the regiment packs were mounted on strips to help you rank up an army, but you still needed to be able to remove individual guys. But this says that you can actually glue them all together. So that may mean that we're doing damage on entire units, not taking individual models away. Of course, you could also, if you glue them down, then you can't use them also for Dungeons and Dragons, which would be a problem. They become less versatile, but you could magnetize them. Hey, Last Phoenix. Welcome, welcome. That way you have a number of very compact and easy to store and transport. Some people even go to the next level and glue their models directly onto the tray without first placing them. Oh, without first placing them on individual bases. I was like, isn't that what we just said? We refer to these solutions as multi-bases. Multi-bases are very useful, but make sure that the multi-base itself conforms to the correct size for the ranked up models as they were mounted onto their individual bases. To continue in the above example, you could mount the 20 elf infantry models directly onto a 100 by 80 millimeter multi-base. That also allows you to do like dioramas. Well, it also allows you to, if each individual model is not necessarily going to be looked at with the same amount of scrutiny because they're inside ranks and things like that. That might also allow you to paint some of them faster. You could paint the ones that are just on the front rank to a higher degree of, to a higher artistic degree, and then have the ones behind it painted to a lesser degree. That could work. That could be faster. And then plus that allows you to be a bit more, like I said, like a diorama of the models. That's an interesting idea, especially if I were printing them and I had a lot of them. That way you could have models that are doing different things in the regiment rather than all having to be on their single base and occupying a certain amount of space. That could be fun. The Last Phoenix says, and only guys with spears could attack from a second rank and stuff, unless you were an elf, and then you get +1 rank, I guess. I remember that. Yep, the importance of spears. The last way of mounting models directly onto a multi-base offers great modeling. This last way of mounting models directly onto the multi-base offers great modeling opportunities as the multi-base can effectively be treated as a mini diorama. So that's exactly what I was thinking. In itself, creating great-looking and very individual units and helping to tell the story or give a theme to the army. You might even end up with a little more or less than the correct number of models on the multi-base. This is fine, but it must be reasonably close to the correct amount, so there's no chance of misleading your opponent with regard to the real size of the unit. Below, you'll find a chart listing the base size for all units as well as the preferred model count, PMC, which is the amount of models you should aim to use on your multi-base units to maintain the spectacle of big battle. Sometimes the practicalities of model size and position will make this more difficult, if not possible. Make this more difficult or not possible, but in essence, you should plan to have 75% or more of the models being represented on the base. So, infantry, unit type, model base size, troop, regiment, horde, and legion. So I guess that's our official nomenclature. Footprint, that's helpful. Well, that might be. I still would be tempted to half it and then use smaller models for that idea of bigger battle. And that way you get twice as many models on your table. Oh, that would be fun. I think that's what I would do. Well, either way, I think I would go and have these bases cut exactly to that size. So I'd have a bunch of bases. And then, all right, it's time for some type of unit of something. Let's make it up. That would have been fun. Like we always had... Warhammer was expensive when we played as a kid. If I had a printer, now I'm wanting a printer. I knew that eventually I was going to have to get a printer. And I want to do models for my worlds. For the action figure prototypes, I had to send off to get those printed, and those were not cheap. I guess eventually over there on the auxiliary table over there, that would be the perfect place for it. I can print in here in the office, right? If I just had a printer going over here. It's not, my problem with that is I can print up all kinds of things. Now painting then becomes an issue. I would have to find a way to do it fast. But my issue with this house is that I've got too much stuff. I already have so much gaming stuff. I've got to get this house up in order. I was also talking to somebody this morning who said, was working on a project and said she might have to come down to Alabama. And I was like, okay. If somebody comes down to Alabama to do some kind of project with me, which was not Brianna, I was like, I'm going to have to get this. Well, even if it were Brianna, I would have to get this house in order because I've got so much stuff, especially gaming stuff is overrunning stuff. So if I had a printer and I was like, now I have a 3D printer, I can download 3D models and I can have that printer over there making plastic objects for me, plastic gaming objects, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I could fill this house. With plastic gaming stuff. I could absolutely fill it up. Yeah, I know it is gamer problems. So that's one reason why I have been hesitant to get into the 3D printing, because then I would be printing all of the Fat Dragon Games stuff, and where would I put it? Like all the dungeons and things like that. The amount of plastic I would have around here would just be multiplying. We would have to start the crafters corner on Sunday nights again, in order to take care of all of this, which would be fun. Now I'm getting excited about it. I'd probably have these laser cut. Probably have the laser cut out of the thin plywood. I wonder if there's a way. See, I'm thinking about the nephews again. So I'm saying, all right, this is what we're going to do. Your father and I are going to play these games. They'll probably want to play it then. We'd need some way to get the models painted up fast. Like have like a craft afternoon. Some of them might get into the painting. But see, they've got all the stuff. They could paint the Star Wars stuff, but they don't sit there and paint. They don't themselves like, okay, let's get this stuff out and paint. They have to they do it if we're doing it. So if I said, all right, it's workshop afternoon. Let's get this army. Everybody get what army you want. We're going to have to print them up, and then we're going to have to base these guys up and create our units fast. I'll have to think about that. Like, how could you do that in a workshop format? So, unit basing examples, multi-basing. Duncan has used simple grass and snow on this ice elemental multi-base. This unit has a preferred model count for large infantry, for a large infantry horde. So that is large infantry horde. Scenic basing. Rob's Iron Watch troops has full model count on his Rocky multi-base. See, like that, those guys don't have to be painted as detailed. Movement trays. These goblin fleabag sniffs and Night Stalker shadowhounds are all on individual bases with movement trays. See, you could do it. You could. Well, there's no reason that you couldn't necessarily combine it if you were worried about, if you wanted to make sure that you could take some of these guys off to play some other game with, which may not necessarily be a concern. It depends on how cheap they are. If you're 3D printing them, then it may not matter as much. Now, painting still takes time. But if you're 3D printing them, it probably doesn't matter as much. But if you're paying a premium for like Warhammer priced army, priced soldiers, I'd want to make sure they're multi-use. Unit characteristics, facing and arcs. Love the look of the goblins. Yeah, those are good goblins. I'd want to do one that's real. I like really good Dark Age fantasy looks. Man, there's so much to do. That's why I liked the Oathmark. I want more of this. Here's an excuse to get more Oathmark miniatures. Because I really like the Dark Ages look. Use it for some real Tolkien-like stuff. I really like that. Now, and here, I guess this allows you to do that by giving you a unit size, some variety in models. Because if I were to play today, if we were to do this, I would want us to be able to have a variety of different models. Why in today's world would you be beholden to a single manufacturer? It would also be nice if once you base them up, you could use them for multiple games. Because I want to write some rules like this. I want to write some rules for this that would be scale agnostic, so that you could scale them up or scale them down. But it sure would be nice if I made up units that could also be used in used for different rule systems, but use the same base size. I mean, it used to be that basing armies, man, that sucked, because every game had different rules for basing. So you had to rebase armies if you're going to move to another game. Don't want that. Don't want that. I guess, you know how I was talking about sliding between the scale up and down of your game? It sure would be nice to be able to slide sideways between some different rules too. Those shadowhounds look more terrifying than the demons next to them. So the goblin fleabag sniffs and Night Stalker shadowhounds. Yeah, these are for these. So I guess these are Night Stalker shadowhounds, and these are fleabag goblin sniffs. I can't believe this is happening. Oh, he got me. he got me into this. He got me interested in this again. There are some websites that have free 3D models. Yes. Yeah, I think the great. Yeah, these things. Oh, you think the gray ones are? Oh, the demons are the shadowhounds. I think that's how I'm reading it. I could be wrong. I don't know. I was saying something else. Oh yeah, because there are a lot of manufacturers. You're talking about free 3D models. Yeah, there are so many that I like. I really like the Fireforge. I really like what Fireforge is doing. Like my favorite manufacturers now, and I don't have a whole lot of them. I still like Thunderbolt Mountain for some of its orcs. If I could get some more Thunderbolt Mountain orcs for that, I would totally do that. Those are metal though. But Fireforge games, I am a big fan of, especially a lot of the historic Fireforge stuff. The stuff that Fireforge is doing for the historic perspective. It's that undead army I've got down there is a Fireforge army. But I also like their historic stuff. I'd like to be able to play both. I played Bretonians, so eventually I would do another knightly army as well. Oh god, man, there's so much to do. But also Highland miniatures. I've got a list of these. The Highland miniatures, they're printing. They're digital models, but man, I really like the look of the Highland miniatures because they look easy to paint. They look like they're styled like the classic Warhammer and not Hero Quest miniatures. They're a little bit more detailed than that, but they look the way that he sculpted them. They look really easy to paint. And they've got a classic look. A fellow Bretonian. Yes. So I would want to try to do some other kind of army like that again. In fact, I should send this stream to my brother. Let me text him. He's working, but I'll go ahead and look at it. I'll go ahead and send it to him. Okay, unit characteristics, facing and arcs. Normally in Kings of War, units have 4 facings. Front, rear, left flank, and right flank. Each of the facings has an arc, an area determined by drawing imaginary lines at 45-degree angles from each corner of the unit, as shown in diagram A. You know, I was thinking about, I was just sitting here thinking about how it standardizes the ranks. In Warhammer, you could have as many different ranks as you wanted, but the number of ranks did matter. Like you could spread your guys out thin, or you could rank them deep, and that did matter. Like how deep they are matters as far as combat goes. But most of the time, I don't remember a lot of times when you in the middle of the battle, you could change their ranking and stuff like that. Like you could march them one way and then spread them out in the middle of the game. So I guess you're losing that if you are sticking these down onto bases and then saying that's what a unit is. But on the other hand, like I said, I didn't see a lot of people doing that anyway during the game. And so the standardization of what a unit is, that's apparently what they did with the I'm looking at it. Song of Ice and Fire game. I may have said Game of Thrones, but it's technically the Song of Ice and Fire game over there. Standardized all of that. So maybe that's not a bad thing. You don't worry about different ranking, but you just get the standardization of what a unit is. Simplicity, like I said, it takes something away because you don't have all the options about exactly how you're ranking up your guys. But on the other hand, because that didn't really change all that often, especially by the time you're making movement trays on the battlefield, maybe it doesn't matter. So normally in Kings of War, units have 4 facings: front, rear, left flank, and right flank. Each of these facings has an arc, an area determined by drawing imaginary lines from 45 degrees from each corner of the unit in the diagram A. Leader point, front arc, left flank, rear arc. The unit leader point is the exact center of the front edge of the unit's base. The reason why we call this the leader point is that some players like to place a suitably imposing model in the center of the first rank to lead the unit. Whenever the rules say to take something from the unit's leader point, such as a measurement or line of sight, it's taken from the point in the exact center of the front unit's edge. It's a good idea to mark the unit leader point on a unit in some way, as it may be difficult to easily locate the center point on a movement tray or multi-base at a glance during gameplay. Swift reform. Swift reform. Swift reform. So units will have one or more keywords listed in bold alongside their special rules. For example, Paladin. If a special rule includes a keyword, then it will affect the unit which has that keyword. For instance, Inspiring, Paladin only, affects any unit with the Paladin keyword. Stats. Each unit in War of Kings has a name and a series of statistics. For short, we'll call them stats, which define how powerful it is in the game. These are type, whether the unit is infantry, cavalry, etc. We went over that. Unit size, how many models the unit comprises. Speed, how fast the unit moves in inches. Melee, the score needed by the unit to hit in melee. Ranged, the score needed to hit the unit to hit with ranged attacks. If it has no ranged attacks, this is a dash. Defense, the score the enemy requires to damage the unit. Height, the unit's height value. This value is used primarily when determining line of sight. Oh, okay. So height. Oh, interesting. I don't remember that from Warhammer. I remember it said height up above, determining unit's height. This value is used primarily when determining line of sight. Unit strength. Unit strength represents the presence of unit exerts on its surroundings and its ability to control the battlefield. It's frequently used when scoring scenarios to determine the winner of the game. Not if we're not removing individual models because of casualties from these, it probably also keeps the game looking more like a real battle, so that you don't end up with a unit of like 3 guys, which sometimes happen. Nerve, attack, the number of dice the unit rolls when attacking, both at range and in melee. Nerve, a combination of the unit's size and training and discipline. This stat shows how resistant it is to damage suffered, both physical damage to its warriors, but also to its morale. Points, how valuable the unit is, used for picking a force and sometimes for working out victory points in scenarios to determine the winner of the game. Special, any special equipment like ranged weapons the unit has. These stats make up what is known as a unit profile, a handy visual summary of the information for each unit. The army lists later in the book have all the unit profiles for their various troops, monsters, heroes, and sorcerers at your disposal. Okay, so type, unit size, speed, melee, ranged, defense, height, unit strength, attack, nerve, points, special. Front arc. During the game, you will often need to determine whether one of your units can interact with another unit, normally once you intend to charge or shoot. Unless specified otherwise, a unit can only interact with other units that is at least partially within its front arc. Line of sight. Certain actions, such as charging or shooting an enemy unit, will require you to determine if your unit can see another unit. This requires drawing an imaginary straight line called the line of sight from your unit's leader point to any point on the target's base. Unit leader point. Unit A, if the imaginary line of sight passes over no other unit's base or terrain feature, then line of sight is not blocked. So we're using this from the leader point. If either your unit or the target unit has a greater height stat than any other units or terrain in its way, then line of sight is not blocked. So that allows either you or the target unit. So you could shoot a large dragon behind somebody. Makes sense. If any unit or terrain in the way has the same height or greater than both of your units and the target unit, then line of sight is blocked. I like standardizing that too. I think that's going to be a good rule. A unit's line of sight can never pass through the unit itself. Note that the line of sight does not have to be the shortest line between your leader point and the target unit's base. Any line from your leader point to any part of the target's unit base will do just fine. Note that line of sight does not have to be the shortest line between your unit leader point and the unit's target. Okay, we said that. If you're unsure of whether your unit can see the target or not, roll a die. 4+ it can, 3 it cannot. You can measure any distance at any time you like. Unless otherwise specified, the distance between units is the distance between the 2 nearest points of the unit's bases. In order to avoid confusion, keep your units at least 1 inch away from other units at all times, except when charging, engaged, or regrouping as explained later. To remove any confusion, ensure that your units are not in base contact with other friendly units at all times. So diagram 1B here. Unit A is trying to draw a line of sight to Unit C. The red lines represent the line of sight trying to be drawn. If either Unit A or Unit C are taller than Unit B, then line of sight is not blocked. If Unit B is the same height or taller than Unit A and C, then line of sight is blocked. In this example, Unit B is considered to be as tall as Unit A and C, and therefore blocks line of sight. Unit A can still see Unit C by looking around the edge of Unit B. Okay, so that's telling you that, okay, so that it can. Unit A can see Unit C because here's the line right here. The turn. Kings of War is played in rounds, with each player taking a turn during each round. Both players roll a die to see decide which has the first turn. The player winning the die roll decides who goes first. That player goes through 3 phases listed below, concluding their turn. The opposing player then takes their turn. When both players have finished their turns, round 1 is complete. Players continue alternating turns and completing rounds in this way until an agreed time limit or round limit is reached. This is usually determined by the scenario being played. So movement phase, ranged phase, melee phase. We'll examine each of these phases in detail on the following pages. Once a player has moved and attacked with all of their units and completed their 3 phases, it's then their opponent's turn. I always like to see trying to do something like simultaneous play with like giving orders to your armies. I would try that. Giving orders to your troops with like a card or something like that, and then having them move in initiative order. But this is very Warhammer-like. You move everything, and then your opponent moves everything. During the movement phase of your turn, pick each of your units one at a time and give them the following movement orders. Complete each order and any movement with a unit before proceeding to the next one. Halt. The unit does not move at all. If a unit is not moved during the movement phase, it has received a halt order by default. Change facing. A unit remains stationary and can pivot around its center to face any direction. How do you get it to pivot around its center? Practically. Advance. The unit can advance straight forward up to its speed stat in inches. For instance, a speed of 6 can move forward 6 inches. At any point during this move, before or after advancing, or anywhere during its advance, the unit can also make a single pivot around its center up to 90 degrees from its original facing. So advance and pivot. The unit can move straight backward up to half its speed stat in inches. Sidestep. A unit can move sideways straight to its left or right at half its speed in inches. At the double, a unit can advance straight forward at the double up to double its speed in inches. Charge. This is by far the most exciting of orders. Your units are about to engage in hand-to-hand combat or tooth-to-claw combat. It's the most complicated, so it's described in detail on page 13. Interpenetration when moving. The following rules regulate interpenetration when a unit moves directly forward, backwards, or sideways. Friendly units can be moved through, except when charging, see below, but you cannot end a unit's move on top of another unit. So you'll have to be sure that your units have enough movement to end up clear of their friends. Also, at the end of their move, your units must not be in base contact with other friendly units. This ensures that both of you and your opponent can tell them apart. Enemy units. Enemy units, on the other hand, block movement. So that's interesting that you can move through them. We don't have like a weight. I wanted to have, like, if I were designing one, I would have what type of formation they're in. Like, are you in a loose formation or are you in a tight formation? But that does make it more difficult if you're going to be putting these down on a scenic base. You could do that if you just have individual models. You could have different bases for them. But that does make it more difficult to do if you're going to have them change. You know, if you're going to have them change what type of operating order they're in, then you would have to change things. Then you would have to be able to change it on the fly during the game. Your units must remain at least 1 inch away from them, except when charging, disengaging, or during a pivot. Interpenetration when pivoting. In reality, regimented units are more flexible in rearranging their ranks and files than our miniatures. So when a unit is pivoting around its center, it can pivot through friends and enemy units and all types of terrain, including blocking terrain in the edge of the table. It must, of course, still end its pivot and its entire move clear of blocking terrain and completely on the table, not in base contact with friendly units and at least 1 inch away from enemy units. During a game, units may begin their turn engaged with enemy units. When such units are given a movement order that takes them out of base contact with enemy units, they are said to be disengaging. Disengaged units may move within 1 inch of enemy units. Disengaging units may move within 1 inch of an enemy unit they are engaged with at the beginning of their turn. They must still end their move at least 1 inch away from the enemy units unless charging. If a unit begins its turn engaged with 1 or more enemy units on a single facing only, it may make a free withdrawal move directly away from the units, up to 1 inch before carrying out normal movement order. If applicable, measurements, line of sight, and front arc checks are then taken from the new position. So withdraw directly away. Unless noted above, all normal rules for movement apply to disengaging units. You couldn't just disengage in Warhammer. If a unit is given a halt order but does not disengage, the unit and all units engaged with it remain engaged. If your unit is not engaged but begins its turn within 1 inch of an enemy unit, it may still move freely as long as it ends its turn further away from the enemy unit where it began. A charge is typically the only way your unit can move into contact with an enemy. A unit can charge its single enemy unit, the target, as long as the following conditions are met. The target is at least partially in your unit's front arc. The unit can draw a line of sight to the target from its leader point. The distance between any point on your unit's front facing and closest point of the target's unit base is less than or equal to double your unit's speed stat. This is charge range. So, and you can measure in advance. So you don't have to worry about a failed charge here. Because some games will make you guess the charge distance, right? Nothing can be measured in advance, and so you may fail the charge. So this keeps from having to deal with failed charges, because you can always measure. Moving charges is carried out in 3 steps. 1, move. First, the charging unit moves forward against the shortest, most direct route possible to make contact with the facing of the enemy unit being charged. This is done without measuring how much distance they actually cover, going around any blocking terrain or any unit in their way, both friendly and enemy units. See diagram F. In order to do this, if necessary, pivot once around their center up to 90 degrees at any point during their move. If the charge can be completed without the pivot, then the charging unit should not pivot. Note the charging unit must go through any area of difficult note that if the charging unit must go over through any area of difficult terrain or over any obstacle that would normally slow down their movement. Note that the charging unit must go through any area of difficult terrain or over any obstacle that would normally slow down their movement. The pivot may not be used to avoid them. These elements of terrain do not slow down charge moves, but they cause the charge to be hindered. Okay, I like disorganization, like potential disorganization or something like that, but we've got a hindered charge. Second, once the charging unit has made contact with the target, pick up and align its front edge flush with the facing of its target in the rear arc being charged. The facing of the target in the arc being charged. See flank and rear charges below. The charging unit must still be touching the initial point of contact with the target and clear all other units. So you snap them together. The charging unit must be able to align the initial point of contact in order to carry out a lethal charge, and must physically have enough space to fit when it is aligned. A charging unit cannot make contact with an enemy unit at a point of contact and then skip over units or terrain to align with a different part of the unit. See diagram G. A wants to charge B and can contact the corner of Regiment B, but he cannot align due to troop skipping to the other side of the troop. Is not allowed, so this charge would not be legal. Illegal charges. Okay. Finally, shuffle the charger sideways until unit leader point is facing directly opposite the center of the target unit, or as close as possible to it. See diagram F4. During this shuffle, the target unit may not pass through other units or blocking terrain. In some cases, this shuffle may take the charging unit into difficult terrain or into an obstacle. In such cases, the charge is considered hindered, as described on page 22. Once the charging unit has shuffled to its final position, the charging units and targets are engaged. Adjudicating front and rear charges. Okay, I'm going to skip by that in just a moment. That seems important, but how to adjudicate how to do those. Multiple charges against the same target. At times, you may want two or more of your units to charge the same enemy. This is allowed as long as each unit can fit against the correct facing of the target once all the charges are completed, but the process for moving the units is a bit different. All right, so you can charge multiple units. Or multiple units can charge into someone. Classic wargaming with lots on adjudicating movement. If a unit begins its turn engaged with one or more enemy units, it may elect to perform a counter charge instead of a regular charge. So if a unit begins its turn, I remember in Warhammer we had different charge responses, right? Stand and shoot. Counter charge wasn't one of them, but it could be. I think I would add that kind of thing in. If a unit begins its turn, but this says if a unit begins its turn engaged with one or more enemy units, it may elect to perform a counter charge instead of a regular charge. If a unit decides to counter charge, it may only do so against an enemy unit with which it is already engaged. It does not need line of sight to the enemy, and the enemy unit does not need to be in the front arc, so it may counter charge against units engaged on its flank or rear facing. If the unit countercharges an enemy unit that is engaged on its front facing, simply shuffle the attacking units to its final position as normal. It is now considered disengaged from all other units, so if possible, any units may still be touching, should be nudged out of contact so they're no longer engaged. Okay, I'm not sure about the countercharge here. I thought it was going to be like a charge response. Remember that if a unit wishes to countercharge an enemy unit it is engaged with, it must declare the countercharge in the movement phase. Don't forget to declare it. I guess this is since maybe you aren't doing charge responses. I haven't seen anything about charge response. So maybe even though this is being handled asynchronously, maybe it's supposed to simulate something that is happening synchronously. Maybe. Terrain types. Open terrain, blocking terrain, difficult terrain, obstacles, hills. Obstacles are height 2 for determining cover, but never block line of sight. Obstacles are long and narrow pieces of terrain, like a low wall, a fence, a hedge, etc. Something that a roughly man-sized creature could see over and clamber across easily. Obstacles should be no more than 1 inch high. Any higher and they would be blocking terrain instead. They impact the game in the following ways. Units can move over obstacles normally, never ending their move on top of them, but they cannot cross them while they are moving at the double. If a charging unit's move has gone through or ended over any portion of an obstacle, then it's hindered as described. On page 22, obstacles are height 2 for determining cover, but never block line of sight. Hills. Hills are elevated pieces of terrain in which a unit can stand. Because of the tactical advantages granted by hills, it's recommended that players avoid placing them in set-up areas. Hills impact the game in the following ways. In order to be on a hill for game purposes, a unit must have at least half of the unit's base on it. When a player, now, if you do have all these guys stuck to bases, adjudicating hills, like if you're doing stepped hills, you can't have like one rank up on a hill and one rank down beneath it. In order to be on a hill for game purposes, a unit must have at least half of its unit's base on top of it. When a player intends for their unit to be on a hill, they should make this clear to their opponent. Hills have no impact on movement. If a unit's leader is on a hill, that unit ignores that hill when checking line of sight. Otherwise, hills impact line of sight as described below. When on a hill, a unit adds that hill 2 unit on a height 2 hill would be height 4, while a height 3 unit would be height 5 while it's still on the hill. A unit that begins its turn on a hill makes a charge that is not hindered against a unit. If a unit that begins its turn on a hill makes a charge that is not hindered against a unit that is not on a hill, the charging unit gains the thunderous charge special rule. Well, there's a lot of things that I think that I like here. Units with the fly special rule, including those who have temporarily lost the special rule due to being disordered. Oh, we do have something about disordered here. That's interesting. Do not gain this bonus. So we've got examples here of obstacles, difficult terrain, blocking terrain, a hill over here. Heights of all terrain features should be agreed upon before the game. As a rough guideline, a piece of terrain is height 1 plus 1 level of height for each inch of actual physical height. So a 2-inch high wall would be height 3, for example. Let's figure out, we don't have much time here. Let's figure out how to actually hit something. Oh, does this excite anybody else? It's been a long time since I played a game like this. So to resolve a unit shooting or casting with a ranged attack, a player will pick a target and make sure it's in range and there is line of sight to it, roll to hit, and roll damage. At the end of the ranged phase, you will test the nerve of any unit that was damaged. We will cover nerve in the following section. Units that have received an at the double order in their previous movement phase may not make ranged attacks. Melee and shooting. Units that are engaged with enemies cannot use or otherwise be targeted by ranged attacks unless specified otherwise. Units that begin their turn engaged in combat must first disengage during their movement phase if they wish to shoot during their ranged phase. If a unit is issued a halt order immediately after disengaging, including disengaging that involves a withdrawal move, any normal penalties for movement, including those for pot shots or reload, do not apply. Units that are engaged with units that are yielding have to disengage in order to shoot. Units that possess a ranged weapon will display it in the special rules section of their unit profile. A ranged weapon's own profile is composed of several different elements. At the very least, it will display the name and range, but may also indicate a different number of dice to roll for its attack to be used instead of the unit's own attack stat. Special rules that affect weapons are also included that only apply to that weapon when used. For example, bows, 24 inches, heavy crossbow, 36 inches, piercing 2, reload, or flame belcher, 12 inches, attack 10, piercing 1, steady aim. If a ranged weapon profile does not explicitly list a number of attacks for that weapon, or lists an RA stat value to be used for that weapon, the attack value or RA value of the unit profile should be used. All right, let's say hitting the target. Once an attack target has been selected, roll the number of dice equal to the firing unit or weapon's attack stat. Your unit's dice rolls, with any modifiers that apply, must score a number equal to or higher than its RA stat value in order to hit the target. Discard any die that scores less than its stat. So a unit that has an attack 10, so it shoots with 10 dice. Its RA value is 5+. The dice are rolled. Any that score 4 or less will be discarded. So I remember in Warhammer we had just a shooting skill, the ballistic skill, but then when it came to hand, you had to cross-reference your weapon skill versus the weapon skill of the opponent, right? And that gave you your to hit. So it looks like we're doing a similar to hit and then damage. I wonder if we're going to have the same, cross-reference attack skills. -1 moving, -1 cover if the target is under cover. Any die that always rolls a 1, or rolls a natural 1, misses regardless of modifiers. However, if modifiers to the roll mean that the unit would need more than a 6 to hit, it may only roll a number of dice equal to half of its attacks. And will only score a hit on a 6. I think in Warhammer you kept rolling. But that's a pretty reasonable way to do it. Okay, if you've gone above 6, half your attack value and rolled for 6. That might be more elegant. Rather than saying, okay, if it's a 7, then re-roll all 6s, and if they're 4+, then they hit or something like that. Additionally, the target unit or firing unit may have special rules. Okay, damaging the target. So after discarding any dice that missed, pick up the remaining dice that scored hits and roll them again to try to damage the enemy unit. The number you need to damage the unit is equal to or greater the target's defense value. This roll can sometimes be modified by special rules, etc. So I guess that's going to be their damage, like their armor value or something. So like armor save, because there was in Warhammer Fantasy Battles, there was to hit, to wound, and then armor save. That was 3 rolls. So here we're just doing 2, I guess. The number your unit needs to damage the target is equal to or greater than the target's defense value. For example, a unit has scored 6 hits on an enemy, which has a defense of 4+. The attacking player then rolls the dice again. Any that score 3 or less have failed to cause damage. Any that score 4 or more have caused 1 damage each. Any die that rolls a 1 always fails to damage, regardless of modifiers. If a modifier brings the score required to damage a target above 6, that target cannot be damaged. Too tough. To record damage, for each hit that scores damage, place a damage marker next to the unit. This represents physical damage and casualties, as well as the decline in the unit's morale, cohesion, and that it will fight on. As the unit accumulates damage markers, it might be more convenient to record this by placing a die, possibly an unusual one, or a different size or color to avoid rolling it by mistake next to the unit, or by using some other suitable tokens to track damage. If you had them on the bases, see, I think things like that would be really good to put on the bases. And I wondered why they didn't do that in the Song of Ice and Fire game, because you are putting like tokens on top of those units or on their bases or something like that. But in Battle Masters there was a little peg or someplace to put pegs. I also think you could do that by using beads. Or it could be something like the equivalent of beads, something that slides down on something. So if you had poles or pegs on the unit's base, you could drop a bead of some kind down onto that, and that would indicate any type of condition, but could indicate damage. If they're red or something, it's indicating damage. And then if it's disordered or something like that, drop the bead on there. That would keep it nice and organized on the table. The Last Phoenix says, I simplified the whole system by just saying that the to-hit table is just die roll plus BS is greater than or equal to 7. For Warhammer Fantasy Battles when rolling missile attacks. I don't remember. I just remember there being one line, for the missile weapons. Melee phase. All right, so roll to hit, roll damage, test the enemy's nerve. So when attacking the unit you charge, roll a number of dice equal to the unit's attack stat. If your unit is attacking to its flank, it double. Okay, so here we go. If it's attacking in the flank, it doubles its attack. If it attacks in the rear, it triples its attacks. Hitting the target. This process is exactly the same as described for range attacks, except it uses the unit's ME stat rather than ranged attack stat, and the modifiers below rather than the ranged attacks. So -1 for hindered. If the target's unit movement has gone through or ended over any portion of rough terrain or obstacle, it is hindered. You will only ever suffer a single -1 for this condition. A unit that is countercharging is never hindered, whether by terrain, special rules, or any other reason. Any die that naturally rolls a 1 is always a miss, regardless of modifiers. However, if a modifier to the roll means the unit would need a 6 or more to hit, they may only roll a number of dice equal to half of its attacks rolling down. Plus special rules. Damaging the target, that's the same. Recording damage, that's the same. At the end of each combat, if your attacking units have managed to score at least 1 point of damage on the target, test target's nerve on 24 to determine if they are steady, wavered, or routed. I also want them to be able to push each other. Like who is succeeding and who is failing in like a push. You might be losing ground. That way you've got some kind of dynamicism to the battlefield, even after the targets have hit one another. After combat, target routed chargers regroup. At the end of each combat, if your charging or counter-charging units manage to rout the enemy unit, it can do one of the following. Stay where it is and pivot around its center to face any other direction. Move directly forward d6 inches. The unit may move its full distance rolled. The unit is not affected by difficult terrain or obstacles. They moved sideways or backward. The unit cannot move through any obstacles. A unit cannot move through any other units while regrouping. Target steady or wavering. Remain engaged. On the other hand, if your units fail to rout the enemy, it remains engaged. Engaged units remain in base contact with one another and do not move. Units that suffered at least 1 point of damage in melee are disordered. Mark them with an appropriate counter. Units will remain disordered until the end of the following turn when the disordered counter is removed. Makes me want to make a game like this too. Disordered units cannot be used to reform. No ranged attacks. Disordered units cannot use any form of ranged attack, including spells. As a unit accumulates damage, it will become more and more likely to lose cohesion, stamina, or even willpower. When to test, you test nerve if any enemy unit that suffered any damage during that phase. If there are multiple units, you may choose the order in which they make tests. In melee phase, however, a nerve test is made for any unit that suffered damage in the phase at the end of each combat. Was this supposed to fight back? So maybe they're not fighting back. Because I remember that in Warhammer, you fought back. Maybe that's why it's putting the counter charge on the other side. Because I guess you're not doing charge responses here. Because you attacked, and then you also got attacked back. But maybe I didn't see anything about attacking back here. So attacking back must be on the enemy's turn. So in the melee phase, it says, however, a nerve test is made for any enemy unit that suffered damage in the phase at the end of each combat, before moving on to the next. In a combat where 2 or more units are attacking, resolve all of the attacks and damage first from all the attacking units, and then make the nerve test. Note that if one of your units receives damage during your own turn, a nerve test is not required. A unit has 2 numbers under its nerve stat. The first number is the unit's wavering limit. The second number is its routing limit. To test the nerve of an enemy unit, roll 2d6 and add any damage currently to the unit's score. On the unit to its score, plus any other modifiers that apply, such as those granted by some special rules. The final total is then compared to the nerve stat. The final total is then compared to the nerve stat values of the enemy unit. If the total is equal to or higher than the unit's routing limit, the unit routs. If the total is lower than the routing limit but equal to or higher than the wavering limit, the unit wavers. If the total is lower than the unit's wavering limit, then the unit is said to be steady, which means it's completely unaffected and continues to fight as normal. For example, let's assume you're testing the nerve of an enemy that has a nerve of 11 and 13 and has suffered 3 points of damage during the game. If you roll a 7 or less, your total will be 10 or less and the enemy will be steady. If you roll an 8 or 9, your total will be 11 or 12 and the enemy will be wavering. If you roll 10 or more, the enemy routs. Wavering, you need to place a counter by it. In its next movement phase, it can only be given one of the following orders: halt, charge, facing, halt, change facing, or back. In addition, the unit is disordered. Rout. The unit is no longer capable of participating in the battle. Any few remaining survivors of any have routed. Remove the unit from the table. Oh, so once it routs, it's gone. You can't rally fleeing troops. I remember rally fleeing troops. It can take no further part in this game and is considered destroyed. In that case, I might make it seems like I would make the unit move forward in order to destroy them. The unit that had caused the rout to move forward in order to destroy them. Because I remember you had to test to see if the units were going to charge after one another. Devastated. When the amount of damage on a unit exceeds its current routing limit, taking into account any modifiers such as rallying or dread, and the unit has not suffered a rout test, the unit is said to be destroyed. So when the amount of damage on a unit exceeds its current routing limit. Oh, I was about to say, so there is some, it's unknown how long a unit can keep going. But actually, there is a hard limit because you can't take more damage than what is on the current routing limit. And the unit has suffered, the unit is said to be devastated. Oh, no, devastated units have their attacks, unit strength, and spell stats rounding down. Mark the unit with an appropriate token. For instance, if a unit that normally had an attack stat of 12 was devastated, it will continue to play using an attack stat of 6 instead. So it isn't clear exactly when it will leave. In order to leave the battlefield, it's got to be routed. But if you heap up the damage on something, it can become devastated and limit its combat effectiveness. I like that. Exceptional morale results. Double 6. If you roll double 6 when testing nerve and the enemy is not routed, it will still suffer from a wavering as insidious news or defeat starts to spread through its ranks. Double 1, hold your ground. If you roll snake eyes, double 1 when testing nerve, the enemy unit is filled with implacable resolve and always will be steady and fight on, regardless of any modifiers. Note that the enemy unit has suffered enough damage, this may still result in it being devastated. Fearless. Some units in the game have a value of dash for the wavering limit. For instance, it could be dash 14. These units are normally composed of fanatical, frenzied warriors or mindless supernatural creatures, in which case they cannot waver and will therefore remain steady until they eventually rout. Of course, a routing result for such troops represents them being utterly annihilated or collapsing as their magical force abandons them. War engines. Let's see what else is in here. Individuals. Special rules. So these are like special tags and things like this. So, brutal. When testing the nerve of an enemy unit in melee with one or more of your units with this rule, add the highest brutal N value to the total rolled. If no value is specified, the unit has brutal 1. If an enemy unit is subject to both brutal and dread special rules, the attacking player must choose which to use. Both cannot be applied against the same unit at the same time. Inspiring. Here is that thunderous charge. All melee hits inflicted by this unit have plus N modifier when rolling to charge. This bonus is in addition to the unit's crushing strength, if any. However, the unit loses this bonus when disordered or reduces this bonus by 1 when hindered. Pot shot. If this unit is given any order other than halt in its movement phase, any ranged attacks with this rule are resolved with a -2 moving modifier rather than normal -1 moving modifier. So you're worse at shooting when moving. Picking a force, army selection. Your army can include up to 2 troop units for each infantry, heavy cavalry, chariot, or cavalry regiment in the army. You must also include up to 2 troop units for each large infantry. You may also include up to 2 troop units for each large infantry, monstrous infantry, or large cavalry horde in your army. So your army can include up to 2 troop units for each of infantry, heavy infantry, chariot, or cavalry regiment in your army. I'm not sure if that's limiting those or if that's saying that you get 2 of those for each one of those that's included. You may also include up to 2 troop units for each large infantry, monstrous infantry, or large cavalry horde in your army. Your army can also include up to 4 troop units for each infantry, heavy infantry. I'm not really understanding that. You may also include up to 4 troop units for each large infantry, monstrous infantry, or large cavalry legion in your army. Maybe that's referring to your army lists or something like that. We will see. Your army may include as many regiments as you like. For each infantry, heavy infantry, chariot, or cavalry regiment in the army, you can also include one of the following units. For example, including 3 regiments allows you to select up to 3 additional units chosen from heroes, monsters, titans, and war eagles. So so I guess that's its way to try to make sure that you don't have just an army of nothing but heroes, nothing but heroes and monsters, which is good. I don't want armies to be just heroes, titans, and monsters. So I guess this is actually saying, so troop is a specific type of size of unit. So your army can include up to 2 troop units for each infantry, heavy infantry, chariot, or cavalry regiment in the army. Oh, or for each regiment. So I guess this is all supposed to be built around the regiment. And for each regiment that you have in your army, you can include up to 2 troop units, smaller units. So we're building around regiments here. Your horde may also include, or army may also include as many hordes as you like. For each infantry, heavy cavalry, chariot, or cavalry horde in the army, you may also include up to the following units: up to 1 hero, up to 1 monster or titan, 1 war engine. For example, including 3 infantry, heavy infantry, chariot, or cavalry hordes allows you to select up to 3 heroes and 3 monsters. This is including all of the following units. This is including one of the following units. Unless otherwise stated, legions are hordes for the purposes of army selection. So, unit allows infantry, heavy infantry, cavalry, horde, legion allows 4 troops, 1 hero, 1 monster titan, and 1 war engine. This is an interesting way of adjudicating what a valid army is. In a standard 2,000-point game, players may only take the same hero, monster, titan, or war engine unit to a maximum of 3 times. Elves could take a maximum of 3 bolt thrower units in this 2,000-point example. This limit includes units with artifacts and unit upgrades. So an undead army could have a maximum of 3 necromancers, regardless of what options or upgrades they take. I'm going to have to get out my undead and see what I've got. Maybe troops are free, so an army can only be limited by other units. They must still cost points. Maybe troops are free, so the army only limited by other units. I think that's what it's saying, but surely they still cost points. For other game sizes, consult the table below. Note that some units have an asterisk next to their name. So, for instance, gargoyles. We call those irregular units because they are not representative of the mainstay force of their army. This means the unit is treated as troop for the point of view of army selection, even if it's a regiment or a horde. It does not unlock optional troop types. If a unit has an N after its name on the list, it is only available in limited numbers and may only be taken in quantities up to its N value. So one with a 1 is unique. Allies. Theme lists. The army lists included in this book represent many of the primary races and dominant political powers of the world of Panathor. They are all considered to be master lists. In future supplements, we will be introducing many of the smaller military powers or flavors of the primary one. These army lists are for all the sub-factions that are known as theme lists and will be identified as such. Let's see. What I want to see. So artifacts and spells, game scenarios, sample scenario, Battle of Golden Field. Okay, so here are some sample dwarves. We're getting toward the end here. Let's go ahead and look at sample dwarf. Sample dwarf units. Or is this not the army list? Sample orc units. Oh, so we don't have the army lists. Okay, well, let's just see what's here with dwarves. So, army special upgrade. Throwing Mastiff. The unit is equipped with a single-use ranged attack on the following profile. Throwing Mastiff, 12-inch, attack 8, piercing 1. This attack always hits on 4+. Once used, the unit's throwing mastiff is destroyed, and cannot be used again for the remainder of the game. Throwing mastiff, army special upgrade. The unit is equipped with a single-use ranged attack with the following profile. I don't know what that is. Okay, so but ironclad infantry. Unit size. Oh, this is telling you troop, 10, regiment, and horde. US. Here is points over here. So a troop does have so many points. So a troop is 70 points. Regiment, 110 points. Horde, 180 points. Speed, melee, defense, no ranged. HT. HT2. Here's our nerve. 10, 12, 14, 16, 21, 23. So you get more nerve as you get more people. I like that. I like that. That's an advantage to putting everybody together as a horde. They're more difficult to break. Okay, so there's a lot I like around here. But as with most things, I want to tinker with things. Oh, see, this one has a throwing mastiff for plus 15 points. Special rules, headstrong. Berserker Brock Riders, cavalry. Dwarf Lord. HT. What is HT? That's not the number of... Oh, height. Oh, it's height. I was wondering, how many of these units have I got? Iron Watch crossbows. Headstrong, keywords, dwarf, Iron Watch. Keywords, dwarf, Iron Watch, Warsmith. Example army. Okay, so example army, 745 points. Ironclad regiment, 110. Ironclad regiment, 110. So 2 ironclad regiments. So I guess this is kind of like your list. So they're taking 2 ironclad regiments. An Iron Watch troop. So a troop of crossbowmen for 100 points. Okay. Iron Belcher cannon for 110 points. Berserker Brock Riders Regiment at 195 points. And then Dwarf Lord, 105 points. So that would be a 750-point dwarf army. I guess another disadvantage to gluing your characters down or gluing your models down to your scenic bases are that if you've got ironclad here, like if this is your basic infantry, and you've got troops, regiments, or hordes, you got to decide what you're making here. You can't use your models from hordes to make up different troops. That would be a disadvantage. I wonder if you could build the bases so that you could put whole troops into hordes. You probably could. But it is something to think about. If sometimes you want to have regiments and sometimes you want hordes, you'd be making up more whole unit types, which could get expensive if you're not printing. Don't bring up height when talking about dwarves. You might get into the book of grudges. Yeah, I wondered. Well, look. So okay, like the Gore Riders, Berserk Brock Riders are height 3. Well, I think there's a lot to like here. That sounds interesting to me. I mean, if somebody said, "Hey, let's play this," let me put it this way. I mean, if like I did a long time ago, if one of my nephews had this game and they were like, "I want to play this game. Will you play Uncle Heath? Look, I got Kings of War. You want to play?" My answer would be yes. My answer would be yes. So I think I would spend some time tinkering around the edges. But that seems to be what we're doing a lot here. So I don't know. All right. Well, I spent a little bit longer today going over that than I meant to, but that's okay. I've got other things I got to do. But hey, I wanted to look at that. It came up. So hey, we took the time to look at it. I hope you enjoyed it. A bit different. So James says, I agree. It seems fun. So we'll see. Makes me want to go and see what kind of skeletons I've got down there. All right, everybody. Hey, I have enjoyed it. Everybody grind on. Well, be productive, be creative, and grind on until I see you tomorrow. Later, everybody.